Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the next segment of World Hijab Day Conference 2023. We are going to begin here momentarily with our guest. But before we begin, we would like to take a moment and thank our sponsors for sponsoring this conference this year. So if you would like to follow us on social media, you can do so at worldhijabday.com. But also you can share this live stream with your friends and family today. And we would like to take a moment to thank our wonderful platinum sponsors, Studious Monday and Modafa. We'd also like to let you guys know about our Learning for Harmony and Educational Inclusivity program. All of the proceeds from our conference this year are going to this educational program so that we can eliminate the amount of Muslim students who are bullied or harassed, either physically or verbally, in school every year. With this program, we'll be able to reduce bullying of Muslim students by providing an overview of Muslim culture to schools through much needed educational programming and workshops. Our initiative, this program, is to get this program in schools by fall of 2023 with our partners in Valley Stream, New York. If you would like to donate to this program, you can do so at worldhijabday.com/donate. So I would like to introduce our guest before we begin. So one of our panelists is Sveto Muhammad Ishoq, who is a women's rights activist, a recent TEDx speaker, and a social entrepreneur from Afghanistan, who began her activism at a young age of 14. Sveto is now the founder of Ayat, a social enterprise, and helping out illiterate Afghan women gain financial independence. She also created Chadari, a storytelling platform to change negative stereotypes of Afghan women and girls. Her work has been highlighted by the British Red Cross, UN Women, UNDPPA, UNHCR UK, and the UK Parliament. We also have Dr. Uzma Syed, who is an infectious disease expert. Dr. Uzma is a TEDx speaker, author, leader, and infectious disease and global health expert. She provides perspectives about vaccines and health equity to national and local organizations, including the Biden administration, and as an executive member of Faiths4Vaccines. Passionate about education, she is also the founder and CEO of Align Us, a nonprofit providing mentorship and career development for the high school students. Dr. Syed is also a mother, recognized as a true trailblazer by a number of local, state, and national organizations. Assalamu alaikum, ladies. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us. We are delighted to be here.
Very excited.
Wonderful. So before we begin, let's see. So I'm curious, in your own words, what does the hijab stand for you? And what does it mean to you?
Should I go first?
Yes, of course. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, I would like to thank for this opportunity and for the invitation to speak at such an important day. And I actually never knew that this day existed, honestly, until this year. Because in the other parts of the world that we lived in, and this is my first time living in the Western country, so I had the opportunity to learn about this day, which is mostly celebrated in the West, which is a much needed day with everything that is going on in the world currently with the Islamophobia and the hate and all those things towards Muslims in general, and specifically towards like hijab, so many cases. And regarding your question about why I think how hijab is not, or in general, the theme of this panel is about like how it's not oppression and progression. That kind of reminds me of, I'd love to share a story here because that's the motivation behind the creation of my nonprofit focused on Afghan women and the storytelling platform. So I used to live in Afghanistan, and then I went to do my first master's in China in 2018. So that was the first time I was dealing with, like, I'm talking with non Muslims, and that was the day that I learned that how they perceived the women of my country, how people who are outside of Afghanistan or who are not Muslims, they perceive my country in general, specifically the women and girls. So, for example, they would think that they would not expect me to be in that program, like in China, and to be from Afghanistan. So, for example, I would just say things like, "I'm from Afghanistan," and I would hear all that surprised looks and something like their face showing that, like, what are you doing in this country? Or so it was very negative. And as an Afghan and as a Muslim, it was very frustrating, honestly, even though I don't blame those people, because that is what the Western media is doing, right? The Western media's role is to basically reinforce those stereotypes and create those stereotypes. So and then that motivated me to create a platform that gives an opportunity for Afghan women to share their stories with the world, because in my opinion, Afghan women are strong, are resilient, are powerful, and are not passive victims. They are not passive victims. And so that's how I created my organization focused on storytelling, because I think that it's so important to hear those stories. And in my opinion, if you are wearing hijab, and if you're hijabi, that does not mean that you cannot progress. So I've lived in a lot of different countries, mostly in Asia, and the perception of hijab, even in those countries, you would think those are Muslim majority countries and those are Muslims, but the perception is the same. So, for example, before coming to the UK, I used to live in Kyrgyzstan, and although there's a large population of Muslims and there's a lot more hijabis in that country, there's this perception of a woman who wears hijab is considered as oppressed, or is considered as she cannot progress, she cannot go and do what she wants. So I'll give you an example of that. So I used to work for climate consultancy in Kyrgyzstan, and one of my colleagues was telling me how her cousin um, started praying, or started wants to wear hijab, but she cannot do it. So she was praying in hiding from her family, even though it's a Muslim family. She was praying in hiding, and then she told me how her cousin wants to cover herself and wants to wear hijab. And when the father of the cousin, learned that the girl, she was wearing hijab, he was or she's praying, or she wants to wear hijab, he got disappointed, and he was very scared, and he just told her that you're young, and these are the words that he said. So you are young, you are ambitious, you have big dreams and goals, like, don't make that mistake of wearing hijab, because that will prevent you. And I was completely, obviously it's completely wrong, because you can wear hijab and you can still progress in your life. And I at that during that time, when I was working in that organization for a year, I learned how I just by me being present in that space and being the only hijabi in that organization, and the only practicing Muslim who would pray and wear hijab, and and someone who is as ambitious as any other person in the world, doing programs, doing projects, delivering talks, and being as motivated, and getting into master's degree at LSE, and doing all those things, that is progression, right? So my hijab didn't prevent me from that. And I learned, and a lot of people, when I left the organization, because I was coming to the UK, they thanked me, and they told me how I showed them a different side of Islam, and of different side of religion, and the fact that you can be hijabi and you can still progress, and you can still achieve your goals, and you can still be great and excel in your field. I think that's something, I think these kind of stories needs to be told a lot. And that's why I'm so passionate about storytelling, because these storytelling and stories shape change perspectives and change narratives about women, specifically Muslim women. So that's my goal in life, is after having that experience of so many negative stereotypes about Afghan women, that's my goal in life, to share stories of strength, of success, of resilience, of people who choose hijab and are not forced. But I, at the same time, acknowledge some places that people force women to wear, and which is also not a good thing. But people who choose to wear, they are proud of it. They are they choose it, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I love that you said that, we're not victims. That's so true. And I think that's a big eye opener to a lot of people. What about you, Dr. Syed? What does hijab mean to you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I just want to start off by saying Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's joining us from all over the world. Would like to say thank you to World Hijab Day for hosting this conference, and a special thank you to Nazma for founding this organization. We're looking at a decade now of advocacy for women, for Muslim women throughout the world, especially to enlighten people about what hijab means. So, hijab to me is in fact very progressive. Islam is progressive. And if you look at it, Islam has so many rights for women. Traditionally, historically, our religion really empowers women. So much so that even in the US Supreme Court, there's portrayal of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Quran, and using that as a leading method of American law. So, you can go back historically and see that there is just so much justice for women and women's rights in Islam. And I think hijab just exemplifies that. Women have the right to choose. I think it empowers us. By dressing modestly, we are really choosing our faith. And we are deciding how we want to be perceived. So, we are in control of our body. We are in control of our image, and we have the power. No one else has this power over us. So I think, in fact, hijab is really quite empowering. And as Sveta mentioned before, this is really important for women, Muslim women, and for non-Muslim women across the world to really understand that, we should have the choice. Nobody else should be in charge of telling us what we can and can't do, what we can and cannot wear. I find myself extremely fortunate to be American, to live in this country where I have so many rights, where I have the right to practice my religion, my faith, and dress as I wish to. I know there's so many women out there that unfortunately don't have these rights in either scenario, the two extremes of being forced to cover or being forced to remove the hijab and not being able to really represent themselves and choose how they want to portray themselves. So again, I find myself extremely, extremely blessed to be in a situation where I have the privilege of wearing my hijab, of representing Islam, of representing so many Muslim women throughout the country, throughout the world, and really empowering others that are coming behind me and those who were ahead of me, who are holding the door open for Muslim women everywhere. So, that's in a nutshell what hijab means to me, and how I do feel that hijab is also very, very progressive, and how Muslim women now, alhamdulillah, do have a platform throughout the world with the use of social media, with advocacy of organizations like this and other organizations throughout the world, where women can feel empowered, where we do have this sisterhood, where we can understand each other, where we can empathize, where we can provide resources to really empower women and girls across the world. I think you might be muted.
I was talking muted. Back to the days of Zoom in the beginning of COVID. Mashallah, you both are amazing. You're trailblazers yourself, and You're an inspiration to young girls who are coming up right behind you with everything that you've accomplished and your accolades and what you're working towards. You are an inspiration to young girls or, girls who would want to go into science and medicine and feel like the hijab might be a barrier. So, to see women like yourself, doing so much work for the community as a whole, being an inspiration to yourself, what inspires you to wear hijab?
That's for me, so I'll answer. Absolutely. So I love sharing my hijab story. I know we all have our own personal hijab stories and how this became a fabric of our lives. And for me, it came a little bit later in my life, and I feel even more strong about that. So my decision to wear hijab came in between, I would say, towards the end of college and right before medical school. So I was already on a track to pursue medicine. I was in a combined medical program, and I was towards the end of finishing up college and starting medical school. And I found myself at a place where I was struggling with so many things, whether it be in my school life, my classes, or my personal life. There was just so many things that were happening that I found myself in a very sad place. And I consider myself extremely optimistic. For people that know me, I'm a very positive person, always glasses half full, it's never half empty. And that's my outlook on life. And I love to spread positivity. So to have this sense of sadness with me was just really unsettling. And I couldn't shake it off. And, whether it be all the obstacles, we all face so many challenges in our lives. We have different obstacles that we face at different stages of our lives. And at this point, at this stage of my life, I just couldn't overcome this sadness, this overwhelming feeling of sadness, and just feeling unsettled. And I knew I had to do something to get myself out of this, to really face these challenges and to move forward. And the only time I felt settled and whole and really at peace was when I was praying, when I was wearing hijab, when I was, reciting Quran, and when I was at the mosque, at Salat. And I remember leaving the masjid one day after Salat, and I had my hijab on, and I felt so good at that time. And I said, I didn't want this feeling to go away. And how could I keep this feeling going? And I decided, you know what? This is the right time for me. I want this to continue. I'm going to take that first step. You take that first step towards God, and He takes 1,000 steps towards you. And I decided I'm going to wear hijab from this day forward. And from that moment, I felt like the weight of the world was just lifted off my shoulders. I felt so at ease, so comfortable. Any obstacle that was in my way, just, every problem just had a solution and just worked its way out. And I swear I have never, alhamdulillah, looked back since then. It has really been the most powerful thing in my life, a sense of pride and joy for me. My hijab really defines me. It is an article of clothing. It is part of my wardrobe. And yet, there are days where I don't even realize it becomes a part of you. It's who you are. And it's the way that I represent myself. And I wouldn't look back and I wouldn't do anything differently. But it just solidified my faith even more. And it gave me an opportunity to really educate people. So as I was starting medical school, you can imagine that at that time, there was a lot of pushback. When I decided that I was going to do hijab, there was a lot of pushback from the community, from family members, concerns. How is this going to affect my path? How is this going to affect me, moving forward? Are people going to assume that I'm so oppressed now that I can't be successful? This image, this horrible and wrong image of Muslim women in hijab. So there was a lot of concern from people in my inner circle, from people around me, that this was going to hold me back and it would not let me be successful. But alhamdulillah, this gave me so much power. It gave me the strength. It let me be successful, not only complete my career. I followed my path as planned, went on to medical school, started medical school in Maine as one of the only visibly Muslim women in my medical school. It gave me an opportunity to really educate so many people about Islam, about women in Islam, about hijab. And it just let me continue this education throughout my career. So when I went on through residency, internship, residency, fellowship, private practice, it just gives you that opportunity to have that conversation, whether it be with your colleagues who come from a place of curiosity, who want to learn more, your patients who have never seen somebody before in hijab. In Maine, I can tell you, I used to go, I'll share a story, another personal story. I used to go to the grocery store and I would be at the register and people over there had never seen someone in hijab. And they would just assume that I was, wearing this because of the weather. The clerk would ask me, "Oh, are you very cold?" And it was so sweet and it was so innocent. And we would just have these conversations. The thing that was interesting in my journey is that 9/11 happened right after I started medical school. So I was a new hijabi who was in a state that was not mine. I was far away from home in an area where Muslims were very underrepresented. And then the events of 9/11 happened. And this was almost a month into my medical school matriculation. And you can imagine the anxiety, the fear, my parents calling me every second, worried about me, asking me to take my hijab off because they were so scared what was going to happen, what were going to be the repercussions for me, their daughter so far away from home, in the climate of what was happening in the country right now. And I can tell you the sweetest, the most moving thing was that my neighbors who were non-Muslim across the street from my apartment in Maine came up to me right after this happened and they gave me their phone number and they said, "If anybody ever says anything to you, if anyone gives you a hard time, you call us right away." So this kind of love, this kind of support was so immense, and it just solidified my faith and my decision to continue wearing the hijab, because no matter how many challenges we faced, and I can tell you that after a month or so later, I came home to New York for a visit. And, again, 9/11 happened in my hometown, in my home state, and I felt very much attacked in that itself. I lost a friend in those events, unfortunately. But I remember being on a subway in Manhattan, and I was fearful for my life at that time because of the amount of looks I was getting, and the threats. And I just felt so hurt that this was happening to me in my own home. I am a New Yorker. This happened to me. I lost someone in the events of 9/11, but yet I was being made to feel like I was the enemy. And so these were just some of the challenges that you faced, as a visibly Muslim woman. And I'll share some more stories about, in medicine itself. But, this just strengthens our faith, our iman. And this is the time where we use our voice to really educate people, to build those bridges, to really combat Islamophobia so that we all can live together in harmony.
Oh, I loved hearing that. And as a fellow Mainer, I can relate to being a hijabi in a very small town. No, that's amazing. I loved what you had to say. And I can't wait to hear about what other challenges you have faced. Sister Sveta, what about you? What inspires you to wear hijab?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a very important one, I think, for us to share our stories. As I mentioned before, like, storytelling is so powerful. It kind of fights stereotypes and misconceptions and misunderstandings about Muslim women. And so what inspires me, so my experiences are very, I would definitely say, different from a lot of women in the West, because I think it's the second year that I live in the West. So I've always lived, although this is the sixth country that I live in, other experiences have been mostly in Asia, all in Asia. So I didn't have a lot of those kind of experiences regarding hijab or Islamophobia or other things. Even in the UK, I'm very grateful because this country is very diverse, a lot of hijabis, and I don't face those challenges. But I would definitely mention one point is that we are born Muslims and then we become Muslim. So I feel like these are two different things. So obviously I was born as a Muslim, but then it's not like I became a Muslim, but I'm sure you understand what I mean, is that you kind of go into Islam and you understand it better and you deep dive in it, it happened again when I left my country, because in Afghanistan everyone Muslim, everyone is practicing Muslim, so you do all those, everyone is wearing hijab and everyone is praying, so you kind of take those things for granted and you do it as a practice, as a culture. And then when I went to China, and it was again a country with not like, you could not see a lot of Muslims, not a lot of hijabis, and it was during that time, even before leaving to China to do my master's, my friends and relatives would tell me, "Oh, are you gonna like remove your hijab or not?" And I would just laugh and say, "I don't know," because I honestly didn't know, because I thought maybe I'll change. Like, we never know. So I just didn't want to lie to them that yes, I'll wear hijab, I'll keep it, because I didn't know. Because in Afghanistan, in some way, it was a social pressure as well, like a there's a culture and there's a pressure, right? Even though it during that time when I was living in Afghanistan, it was not forced, so legally it was not forced, but still there was a lot of like peer pressure to like wear it, and so from society. And then I didn't know, I was like, maybe I will not, like, I don't know what will happen, because that's how I would see girls leaving Afghanistan, not wearing hijab anymore. But I thought maybe I'll have the same thing. But what magic, alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful. So what happened is that when I went to China, I just saw, so it was like a non-Muslim country, not a lot of Muslims, not a lot of hijabis, and I saw um how again people perceive the hijab in Islam, and it was mostly from people who lived in the West. Just to make it clear, not people from China, because in general, in China, people don't have a lot of knowledge about Islam at all. So they would just innocently, like very, as a doctor mentioned, like they would just ask like, what is this, like they would have no idea like, what is this thing that you're wearing. So it was really nice and like sweet, and I would just explain to them like, this is a part of my religion. So and then on the other hand, I obviously, me leaving my home for the first time, leaving my family behind, going to a country, another country, alone, and that I don't speak a language, so I face a lot of problems and challenges in terms of that, which we always say that the challenge that you face strengthens your iman, and that's for sure, that's for sure for me, because I face a lot of problems there, and that strengthened my iman. And that's where I learned, it was there when I was in China that I learned that this is my choice and I'm not forced to wear it, and this is my choice, I'm wearing it. And it was such a beautiful realization, especially when I would see, so for example, if I would see, I saw a lot of other people like who were not Muslims, and I would just like the whole religion, and I would kind of I doubt I learned a lot about Islam on myself, because when someone asks you about why you're wearing this, you do it in Afghanistan like as a culture, you don't know the real deep meaning behind it or the real purpose. You wear it because everyone else is wearing it. But there, I know I knew something, but then I would do my own research because I wanted to give them like a correct answer. So that, doing research myself, learning more about Islam myself, that made me even more passionate about my religion, and even more motivated, and even more passionate about like why I'm wearing it, and it's my choice and I'm doing it. And the beautiful thing is that I think the most beautiful thing about wearing hijab is that we are doing it for Allah and for nothing else and for no one else, and we're doing it for Allah, for our creator. I think that's the beauty of hijab, and of doing other, and being Muslim in general. Like whatever we do, we are doing it for the sake of Allah. So that's kind of the message that I always tell people. And right now, obviously coming to the West, or kind of keep practicing wearing hijab and praying, and doing, being more like, my iman became stronger there, which is very interesting, right? People usually think that when you leave the country, when you go to another non-Muslim country, you kind of lose your faith. And but no, and that was another message. So when I went back to Afghanistan after my studies, even my uncle, so I prayed in my uncle's home, and he was just telling me how he just told me like that, oh, you're praying, like I just told him like it doesn't mean if you're outside of Afghanistan or if you're living in a non-Muslim country you lose your faith or you just become something else. So I think that's another misconception. The misunderstanding about Islam is from two sides. From one side in the West, Islamophobia and other things that you're all familiar more than me because you have more experiences with that living in the West. And from the other side, there's a big misconception when this misconception of, oh my God, you're leaving the country, you become like a non-Muslim, you don't practice more Islam, and you just change completely. I think that's also a big other misconception and stereotype and misunderstanding from the Muslim world, to understand that no, even if you're in the West, you can keep your faith, you can have iman, you can be practicing Muslim, you can wear hijab, and you can do all the things that you're doing in a Muslim country, and you can choose to do that. And that there's a power in that, and I feel very powerful and grateful and very thankful to Allah for giving me that strength to keep doing it, and I really pray that it will continue.
Ameen, inshallah. I love what you said, that there's a misconception about Islam and when you are in a non-Muslim country versus a Muslim country. Because as a revert myself, I think people are very confused when they realize that Islam is universal. And it's not just for one set of group of people, it's for everybody. SubhanAllah. And I think both of you touched on the fact that the hijab is a visible tool of education on Islam. It's the first thing that people see about us when we're Muslim, and it does become part of our identity.
Definitely.
Yes. So I love, I see a comment here in the comment section. It says, born Muslim, then became Muslim. So she's quoting Sister Sveto here, and I think that was a brilliant comment as well, because it's very true, because even if you're born Muslim, it's really up to us about how we decide to practice Islam and progress and transform. So, and with the hijab, there's, I think we go through a lot of transformation, and like Sister Sveto said, we do, our iman does grow in the greatest of challenges. So you mentioned a little bit of your challenges that you faced, but I would love to hear more. I think Dr. Syed said she had some stories she would like to share with us from her medical experience.
Absolutely. So I was mentioning before that my hijab journey really began right before I started medical school. So when I was in Maine, at my amazing medical school, one of the classes that I had to take was actually a lab class that was called osteopathic manipulative medicine, and where we have to partner up and we deal with the anatomy. And in this lab, we learn about different parts of the human body and how we can address them. But part of the lab requirement meant that I would have to be paired up with somebody, and also who would be essentially working on different parts of the head as well, head and neck. And that would require me to take off my hijab. Now, you can imagine the fear and the anxiety that started settling in. How was I going to handle this? Because I can't take my hijab off. And again, I'm the only Muslim woman actually in my class, and hijab wearing. And I'm in Maine, and I'm in medical school. And again, on the backdrop of everything that's happening at home, and everybody telling me to take the hijab off, and the challenges I might face, and all of these thoughts spiraling through my head that, how am I going to overcome this challenge? So I decided to actually, and now imagine this lab is actually a big open room where they have tables set up, and the entire class is in there, usually like 100 plus 120 students in there working with each other. So it's not even like a small group of people. This is the whole class. And I said, immediately that this was not going to happen. But what are going to be the consequences for me? Am I going to be kicked out of medical school? Like, this is I'm just starting out my journey. How am I going to handle this? So what I decided to do was I went up to the chairperson of this department, and I pulled her aside and I explained the situation to her that, I explained what the hijab is. She obviously saw me in hijab, and I explained to her, educated her about the religious significance of it, how I dress modestly, how I have to cover myself. It's not just hijab, but clothing as well. You will always see me, in modest clothing. and, how this was going to be a conflict for me participating in this course, and how are we going to move forward from this? And you can imagine it took a lot of courage to do this at that stage of my life. Again, I'm young, I'm just starting medical school. I have all these fears that what are the repercussions that I'm going to have. Medical students are always fearful that if they speak out, if they say something, it's going to negatively affect them, that their grades will be affected by it, their courses, their, graduation, the next step, because there's always a next step in medicine, whether it's rotations, medical rotations, residency, internship, everything. So the chairperson was actually the sweetest, kindest woman that I know. She actually listened, was very empathetic, and within a matter of minutes, she said, "Don't worry, we're going to take care of this." So in the entire lab room, what she did was she chose a corner of the room in the back where she had all of these staff members come in and set up an entire sort of wall, made divisions there with these panels that they had to block this entire section of the room for privacy for me. And she told me that I could choose whichever partner that I wanted to do this with, that, I could be with a female partner for this lab, and that, I would be completely secluded from that lab, but be able to see them and participate still, but have my own privacy during this lab. So that, when I had to take my hijab off for the exercises, specifically for the head and neck, that I would be completely, walled off from the rest of the class, and nobody would be able to see me. But yet I wouldn't be missing out on that educational aspect either. So this was a really, really pivotal, special moment for me, because the fact that this medical school in Maine was deciding and choosing to support their one medical Muslim female hijabi medical student spoke volumes, because they had never done this before, nor did they need to do this. But this chairperson and the school decided that this was important for them to support their students, to make sure that their students had everything that they needed to be successful. So that was a very, very important time for me, because I realized that there is no reason that it just reinforced my faith even more. It just reinforced my iman. It just reinforced my belief that I did not need to forego my faith for my success. This was the narrative that was being told over and over to me, whispered in my ear, that when I started hijab, that I was going to face too many challenges, that I would not be successful, that this was going to hold me back. And lo and behold, when the first obstacle came in my way, there was immediately a solution. Alhamdulillah. And this is what's happened for me since the day I started hijab. Alhamdulillah. There are challenges that I face, but there have been ways around it. I have found ways to solve those challenges, to really overcome them. Now, Muslim women in general, visibly Muslim women do face a lot of challenges, Islamophobia, hijabophobia throughout the world. In medicine, you can imagine that when I started my journey way back when, women were underrepresented in the medical field, and especially Muslim women. Now, hijabis were even less prevalent, but as time went on, I started seeing more and more Muslim women, visibly Muslim women, coming into the medical field, whether they were medical students or medical residents. It was just an amazing, amazing thing to see that the number was growing. Now, despite we have a lot of gender parity in medicine, unfortunately, we still see that women are not in leadership roles. There's a huge gap. There's even a gender pay gap for men and women in medicine of all fields. You would be surprised. Many people are surprised to hear this, but for Muslim women and visibly Muslim women, hijabis, it becomes even more challenging, because there are so many challenges that they face on a daily basis. I can share so many stories from medical school to internship, residency, fellowship, private practice, where I've had to deal with challenges, whether it be with your colleagues or your seniors. There's always somebody above you in the medical field. It could be essentially your boss, your attending physician. It could be from your patients. There's a lot of challenges that you face on a daily basis. And in the climate that we're in, with the rampant Islamophobia, it has become more and more difficult. So, the hijab has really empowered me to continue that education. So I'll share a story with you. What happens very commonly now is, I may walk into a patient's room. Now, this is something that's happened to me since I was a medical student, and it continues to happen now as an attending physician, in practice for over a decade now. The first impression is everything, right? So you walk into a patient's room and I start to introduce myself before I'm even able to really speak the entire sentence of saying, "Hi, my name is Dr. Uzma Syed. I'm your infectious diseases physician." Before that sentence is even complete, there is a look on a patient's face. Most of the time, it's recognizable within seconds because I've seen that look so many times. They are formulating so many thoughts about you. They are formulating all these stereotypes, all these opinions, all of these different thoughts are going through their head, and you can see it on their face because it's this look of suspicion. It's a look of shock. It's a look of horror. It's a look of, just disbelief. And I've seen that so many times. I tell people that if I had a penny for every time, I've seen that look or for what sentence is about to follow, I'd be very, very wealthy. But, I speak my sentence and they look at me and then they say, "Oh, okay, where are you from?" And I say, "Well, I'm, from New York." "No, where are you really from?" And then, I have to go into the whole explanation, which is, kind of adding insult to the injury, where you say, "Well, I'm American, where are your parents from?" So we go into this whole explanation. But as you start talking, the next sentence that usually comes out of their mouths is, "You don't have an accent at all." And then you get into the conversation, "Well, that's because I'm American. But, this hijab that you're seeing, it means that I'm Muslim." And then I start educating them. So, they get comfortable. Then you start having that conversation. I explain to them why I'm there. I'm their physician. I'm going to be taking care of them. And we then move on to the problem at hand. After this whole encounter, they get comfortable. You have that relationship with them then, and you have this rapport with them. But it's that initial encounter, right? That's everything. It's that visual. It's that, the first 2 seconds where somebody sees you and they're already starting to formulate all these thoughts. There's many, many different negative things that I've heard from patients before, where they will start mentioning, terms like terrorist, this, that, and all of those stereotypes fade away once you have that opportunity to really have that discussion, to educate people, to empathize with them, to show them that Muslim Americans, Muslim women are just like every other women that they may encounter, like every other physician they may see. But that doesn't discount the challenges that we face, because another colleague may not have to go through all of this. They may not have to explain themselves or justify or dignify themselves by going through all these hurdles. Another simple thing that I'll share is, during my training, this is something, again, that very commonly Muslim women, hijabis, have to face these challenges during their medical school training and even throughout their career. I remember having a surgery rotation. Most people, everybody has to go through a rotation in medical school where they are able to participate in surgeries, and they're there as a medical student observing. But you can imagine that the attire in the operating room has to be sterile, and there's certain protocol that you have to follow for that. And the first day that I was on my rotation, I remember hearing that, you can't wear that scarf. And this was a huge challenge, again, because this is part of my identity. This is part of my faith. This is part of me and why I'm dressing modestly. And this is not going to come off. But they don't understand how delicate this matter is, and how, okay, we have to find ways around it. You can wear a sterile cap, but that has to be put on in the locker room. There's privacy issues. I can't just disrobe or take off my hijab. For them, people that are not aware of what our practices are and what our principles are, they don't understand the challenges that we face. So again, there's hurdles, but there's ways to overcome hurdles. We have found amazing ways of having sterile hijab and caps in the operating room as well now that it's become much easier for Muslim women. But what's really interesting and ironic during the pandemic, something that I noticed was, the entire paradigm shifted. Everybody was now wearing PPE, and you would see hospitals where everybody looked the same. And what was one thing that was very defining besides the masks was that every single woman that you would see now was in fact wearing head covering that was essentially like hijabs. So now, whereas you were the only person wearing hijab in a hospital, now every single woman, no matter what their faith, was wearing a head covering that looked like yours. So it was, subhanAllah, just an amazing thing to see. But those are just some of the personal stories that I've had.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that they were accommodating to you in your school. And even at that time, I mean, because that's actually really progressive for the time being. We're seeing a lot of more women entering the professional workplaces. And with that, I do see more accommodations and avenues being opened up to allow women to practice their faith and their profession. And this has been made a reality because of women like yourself who are opening the doors to the next generation. The challenges that you're facing are making a difference for the younger generation of veiled women. For some, Islam seems to be backwards, but it's really not. So when we say progression, we aren't talking about Islam. We're speaking about the progression of workspaces we're in or how we're viewed by our communities. So, Sister Sveto, we would love to hear what challenges you have faced and how you overcame them.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, obviously, as a Muslim, and specifically as an Afghan, I would definitely say, is that whenever I introduce myself and just say, "Oh, I'm from Afghanistan," obviously this whole conversation usually starts with the topics about the negativity that is associated with Afghanistan, like the Taliban, the war, child marriage, all these negative topics. So it's all about a matter of perspective. Yes, those issues we have, those are present issues, those are something that we cannot ignore. See, like the world also needs to see how Afghan women are resilient, they are strong, they are powerful, they are not passive victims, they are not victims of violence, and they are actively fighting on daily basis. And they have the fact that they have played a key role in bringing positive changes in their communities, in their societies. And I think those are some of the things that the world kind of needs to know. And me as an Afghan, as a Muslim, I always try to mitigate or like remove those stereotypes by sharing stories, by telling people about my experiences or my journey my experiences of living in Afghanistan and what things that I have done there, and the amazing women that we have, the amazing Afghan women that I'm very proud of. Even now, I think the past 1.5 years of what's going on in Afghanistan has proved to the world that Afghan women are not passive victims, because they are actively challenging and actively trying to challenge their status quo by doing different things. So right now, I'm sure everyone is aware, there's a big women's rights crisis happening in Afghanistan, and Afghan women are actively trying to change their status quo. So what they are doing is they are protesting on the streets. They are creating alternative ways. So, for example, right now the Afghan women and girls cannot go to school, and then it is the Afghan women who are teachers, have turned their homes into classrooms. So they're not passive victims. They are trying to actively challenge the status quo and change their situation, and they should not be seen as someone who's passive. And definitely they should be seen as heroes, as people who are brave and powerful. So in being like a hijabi in the West that I live now, I think I have personally, and not only in the West but specifically in the West, because of the Islamophobia, I personally have a huge responsibility. And I think every Muslim and every hijabi should have that responsibility, because whenever we wear the hijab and whenever we go and speak in different avenues and interact with different people, we have this huge responsibility on our shoulders. We should face that. We should have that internalized. Every interaction that we make with the non-Muslim, with someone else, we just have to know that this is a huge responsibility, because we are representing Islam. We are representing our religion. We are we are representing that beautiful region that we have, and we have to make sure that we are giving the right message and delivering it in the right way and telling it in the right format. And I think that's what matters. So for example, I obviously I face a lot of stereotypes and kind of those challenges regarding me being an Afghan. So I the most recent one was just like in like a coffee shop. Uh, there was a man who asked me like the when I was buying from supermarket. He told me like how where are you from. I told him like I'm from Afghanistan, and he goes, you don't look like Taliban. Okay, I really, I was like, I didn't even know how to respond to that, because at the beginning, but now I'm so used to these comments, so used to these things, that I think the change in my response completely changed. So how I cope with those challenges, with those kind of stereotypes about my country and the women of my country, is I just smile, I just laugh and I smile, I just like don't say anything. And obviously through conversations, through kind of explaining and talking about my work and in general, I think that's how I challenge the stereotypes, because they learn more through information, they gain more information, and they understand it better, especially issues around hijab. So I think that's really important. And I, as a Muslim, I feel responsible. I have the responsibility, this huge thing in my shoulders, that I have to represent the Islam well, and they have to say it well. So for example, there's a lot of, I would definitely say, because of the situation in Afghanistan, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconception that it's going on right now in the world. How people think, from my understanding and from me working with other activists in the UK or in other countries, is that how people think that Afghanistan is everything is forced, and that's true. But then they think that the Afghan women, or that Afghans don't want Islam or Islamic country. But that's completely untrue. That's not true. Like yesterday, I was talking at the UK Parliament in their International Development Committee, and that's one point that I emphasized a lot, was that we Afghans, we want our Islamic rights. We don't want something less or something more. We want our Islamic rights, and we love our traditions. We love our culture. We love our religion. So I think, and a lot of women, they are Afghan women, they are proud of their religion. They are proud of their culture. They want to have rules. They are already abiding by the Islamic rules because we are Muslims. So I think that's a biggest stereotypes. Me as an activist working with different groups, with dealing with different people, that's what I hear from them, is that they think that we don't want that. But that's not true. Afghan women, they love their religion, they're proud of their religion, and they yeah, so we just want our Islamic rights, which is taken away right now from us, even the basic human rights and basic Islamic rights, rights to get education, to go to work. And we all know that Islam is not that. Islam, these rules and policies are in complete contradiction to what Islam has told us and has taught us. So I think that those are the kind of, me as an activist, that's another responsibility that I have in my shoulder, that to share with the world that no, Muslim Afghan women are Muslims and they want their Islamic rights. That's it. That's the clear point that I always make. And obviously, in making that, is it's um, a lot of challenges that I'm facing, and doing that. Even that's really disappointing that I have to say it. Even among the Afghan diaspora, uh, the Afghan diaspora's mentality is completely different from people who are on the ground, who are in Afghanistan, and who are proud of their religion. So I think that's something that I'm challenging personally in my activism. Yes. So for example, I'll give you an example. It was like a month ago, we organized a protest here in London for Afghan women and girls. And then, which was joined actually by Malala Yousafzai, which was we were very grateful. So she supported us, and so during that protest, it was very clear to me how some Afghans, which was very disappointing for me, from the Afghan diaspora, were very hesitant. So, for example, I would chant, because I was chanting, and I would just say like, "We want our Islamic rights," and then there's an Afghan lady that goes that, oh, don't say that, it's too long, people cannot say that, they cannot like scream or chant that. And that was, to me, was very frustrating, because first of all, it's not long, people can say that, like, we want our Islamic lads, you can say that, it's not long sentence to say that. Second of all, it makes me very mad and frustrated that how an Afghan who is a Muslim, who's hesitating, who's kind of worried and kind of afraid of using those words like Islam, Muslim, or those things. So I don't know what's wrong. Like, I'm still figuring out like what's wrong with the Muslims here, like with Muslim Afghan diaspora in the UK, is that this is the challenge, personal challenge that I'm facing through my activism. But it's my personal mission, life goal, life mission, is to spread that true message that Afghan women and girls want their Islamic rights. They are proud of their religion, they are proud of their culture, they love Islam, and they want their basic human rights, which is guaranteed in Islam. And Islam has given women every right that she possibly can ask for. And that's all we need, and that's all we want, and that is our demand.
That is absolutely amazing. I love what you ladies had to say. Sveto, you said it, we each had a responsibility, and I wholeheartedly agree. We each have a responsibility to challenge those stereotypes and to educate through our work and our actions and through our interactions. Muslim women are in the community every day challenging those stereotypes. It may not be a visible force, but it's a very strong force, and every effort continues to contribute to that greater cause. It's through those avenues that people can begin to understand that we're not oppressed or victims, like Sveto said, and nothing holds us back. It's also important to know that young Muslim women understand the significance of their own strength and how Islam and the hijab can contribute to that and pushes them forward and doesn't hold them back. So based off of that, what advice do you have for young girls who feel like they can't live their dreams or reach for the stars, who are always told that they're not good enough? What would you tell those young girls?
Should I start?
Yes, please.
All right. So, I mean, a message for all the young girls out there: don't give up, be confident. Do not doubt yourself. I think this imposter syndrome sets in very early, and it carries out throughout your adulthood. So you'll be surprised to see that there are many people at different stages of their lives, women feel this way very, very often, but you need to let go of that. You are good enough. Oftentimes you will be the best candidate. So you have to be confident and put your best foot forward. If anything, the hijab will empower you. It will not hold you back. Trust me. We can all speak from personal stories and from, all of us sharing our stories with you, that this is going to help you. So don't doubt yourselves. There will be challenges. We are not sugarcoating it. There will be days where you will feel down, but just know that we are all here for you. We are all here to lift you up. And as you're going through this and as you're succeeding in life, just always, always remember to hold that door open for those behind you. Okay, continue to pave the way forward for those that come behind you, and just be confident in yourself, feel empowered by your hijab, and know that once you follow your faith and stay true to your faith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you the rest of the way.
I love that. Hold the doors open for the person behind you. It's such a powerful statement for those young girls. What about you, Sister Sveto?
Well, I've been there's so many girls, women and girls that tell me that they want to start wearing hijab, and that they're kind of afraid to do it, or like they are not sure. I definitely would recommend and would suggest that to just start it, because for the sake of Allah, if you'll start it, Allah will help you on the journey, and it will get easier. It will be easier, I guarantee you, I promise you. And I've also seen my friends telling me like how they want to remove the hijab because they feel, well, I don't know, pressure, sometimes social pressure. So I definitely tell them that just remember why you're wearing it, because you're doing it for Allah. I think kind of having that, people who are struggling with wearing hijab, I think the one thing that I want to tell them is that you maybe write it, I don't know, in like a sticky note or something, that the why part, like why you started wearing it hijab, like why you're doing this in general. Obviously we're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think that's something that we have to remember. And whenever you face challenges regarding your faith, or you feel hesitant and want to remove it, or you just feel like confused, I think you should just look at that sticky note that you put out there, and you wrote the why part, like why you have started it in the first place. And I think the why part is so big and so deep, that it will help you, it will help you to keep going and to keep pushing forward, because it's worth it. We are doing it for Allah, we're doing it for our Lord. So I think that's totally worth it, and you just have to do it. And in terms of other message that I want to say is that just uh, be confident and in wearing hijab. I know it's especially women who start wearing it at the beginning, they might feel shy and not confident, but believe me, once you start wearing it, and once you are very, I love the hashtag, actually I love the hashtag and the theme of this year's conference, hashtag unapologetic hijabi. I think that's amazing. Just be unapologetic hijabi, be unapologetic Muslim, and just take the space and be yourself, and don't feel shy or hesitant to speak about your religion. Or for example, if there's a prayer time, you just like can ask like, oh, is there a place to pray? I think that's something that I'm facing challenges of, like when people say that, or like, or explaining to them about hijab. Or for example, I face a lot of problems about like men like shaking hands, and I don't shake hands obviously, and I think that's a challenge that I've been facing so much, that I'm so trained about like how to respond to that. But now it automatically comes. I'm just, because at first I would be very stressed, like how to respond, like what to do, how to explain. But now I'm very, even yesterday actually I faced that challenge again. I just like put my heart here, and I just say, sorry, it's because as a part of my religion, I don't shake hands with the opposite gender. So you learn these things. These things are difficult, but as you do it, and as I want to finish again, like by saying that just remember your why you started it, why you're doing this, and there's a bigger purpose we have, right? We're doing it for all. I think that's something that we have to be clear, and believe me, once you start your journey, especially hijab journey, Allah will help you, and there are bigger rewards for that, which is totally worth it.
That is some great advice for all you young girls out there. That's amazing. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this segment. It was such a great discussion, and I'm sure that our viewers greatly benefited from this and from the advice and the education that was shared today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum. All right. Before we log off here, we just want to take a minute to thank our sponsors. So we'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, Studious Monday and Mudafa, for sponsoring this year's World Hijab Day Conference 23. And be sure to stay tuned for our next segment. We'll be coming up here in just a few minutes. And we will thank you for viewing this conference, and we will see you in our next segment, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.